Hey guys, Butts here, and today I want to talk about Manastorm, some cool interaction I found and builds I've been playing with it. So first, let me give you like my high-level elevator pitch and why I've been using on attack builds. Pretty straightforward. You get to scale things like mana leech and total recovery from leech, so you can leech around half your mana pool back a second, where a spell build is going to have to rely on things like mana regen and a mana pot to recover their mana once they've spent it all with Manastorm. Another really cool interaction I found with Manastorm that I've been using on and off depending on what content I've been doing is Temporal Rift. So if you're doing something like Delve, Ritual, Bossing, Harbingers, or anything where you're kind of in the same general location for an extended period of time, you can use Temporal Rift because anytime you press Temporal Rift, if you stop scaling it past 13 so that the cooldown's just above 4 seconds, it means that anytime you press it, you're going to be back to full mana. So you don't actually have to, regain your mana back. You'll just keep it full. This is something you probably definitely would like to use more on like a spell build, but I was originally planning on farming Ritual on a wildstrike of Extremes champ using Paradoxica because Paradoxica wants a lot of flat damage, Manastorm gives a lot of flat damage, and then using this for because we're scaling life and mana, so get a ton of damage out of this helmet. Anyways, Ritual ended up feeling pretty crappy, so I've mostly just been mapping on this Venom Gyre Deadeye version of this, which has been very fun. I think this build also has some like pretty interesting stuff going on. So this build scales leech really hard, and this build has no fizz mitigation anywhere, which sounds really scary, right? However, since we have tons of instant leech and life gain on hit, we can use Strength of Blood, so that we get all of that life leech converted into fizz damage reduction, which ends up being quite a bit. And since our hit damage is very high, we actually have a Fortify and a Whirling Blades, which is up pretty consistently. One of the nice things about getting to use a claws, you have access to this giant flat mana roll. I was hoping to fracture this alongside attack speed, and then I was going to use Deafening Essence of Woe to get spell damage on this, alongside crit chance, and then craft hits can't be evaded. And then I was going to use Call to Arms, Battle Mage's Cry, and Sigil Power, which would be a ton of damage. But unfortunately, I fractured flat cold, and I'm using Enduring Cry, which is fine because, like I said, this build doesn't have a ton of fizz mitigation, so the Enduring charges do go a long way. Also, a nice thing about a claw is you get access to 10% more instant leech, so that stacks with this. So we have 20% instant mana, life, and ES leech, which goes a really long way because we're scaling offense and defense off mana. Since we're right by the Lightning Mastery, we can do this, which gives us mana applies to shock effect at 30% of the value, which is a shit ton of damage because we have a ton of increases direction to max mana. Since we path through decks, we can convert all this to stun avoidance to get 100% stun avoidance chance. Since we're a big mana build, our life total is pretty low and stun threshold is based off life, so getting stun immunity is pretty important. I can talk about some of the downsides to this build. Like, some of the nice things is we're right by all this leech, right by all the claw stuff, etc. However, right next to Ranger, there is not a ton of increases to actual max mana. Like, I'm getting most of my increased max mana just from this Healthy Mind, which could also be here, could also be here. But long story short, there's not a lot of mana. That's why I like this weird pathing down to here. And all of my jewels are going to have increased mana on it. And then I come up here for more mana. But I don't have a ton actually on here. I have it mostly from int on gear and flat mana on gear. That's why my mana pool is kind of small, besides being pretty low level. Weirdly, there is great access to mana right next to Duelist. And it's one of the reasons I was playing a wildstrike champ. There's 40% life right here, and mana flows, and revelry right here. So you have over 100% increased mana just in this section of the tree. Hell, I think it's closer to 120, 130, which is, I know, strange because the Duelist, you wouldn't think that he has access to all the mana, but he does. Obviously up here by Scion's really good spot, by Templar's really good spot, up by Witch. But yeah, you could say the placement of Ranger is not ideal for this, but man, Venom Gyre is so fun. So I was willing to take the L there. One of the other downsides to the way I have this currently set up is I'm using Mind of the Council, mostly because it's a ton of damage and it's an evasion ES base, which lets me use the suppression mastery. But it does get kind of annoying when you're backtracking because you're a Deadeye with Tailwind and you have a ton of attack speed, so you can actually dumpster your mana way faster than you recover it. When you're backtracking, when you're attacking, you won't notice it, but when you're backtracking, it can be a little bit annoying. So ideally, eventually, you would switch to Crown of the Inward Eye, which will be similar damage, but you just need to make up that suppression elsewhere from losing the 15% from the mastery. You could also eventually switch to a Haunted Helmet with mana per int. That's going to be pretty expensive to make, but I put that on evasion ES base as well, hopefully alongside flat int. And then, yeah, you would actually have like pretty similar to this without the downside. Other downside is using Arcane Cloak alongside automation is it kind of makes the timing a little weird when you're sacking your mana for Manastorm. It was getting kind of annoying on my champion, so I actually switched to cast when damage taken Molten Shell because he had so much armor. You can do the same thing here with cast when damage taken Immortal Call, like increased duration, if it does start to bother you. It hasn't been a huge problem on this Deadeye because like the consistent leech from like the range of Venom Gyre and stuff has felt pretty fine, but it's just something to keep an eye out for. If it bothers you, you can switch it. You don't get all of your damage from Arcane Cloak since most of it's from Manastorm, so it ends up being about like a 20-25% damage loss, like total, which is quite a bit, but if it bothers you, you can switch off of it. Last downside I wanted to touch on is since we're using Claw, you have to use Whirling Blades or Shield Charge instead of Leap Slam. With Leap Slam, you can actually hop over stuff or like terrain changes, but this one, if I need to do that, I need to use Frostblink, which is pretty bad because that is our defensive layer. You can mostly mitigate this one by map selection. Like I don't have maps that I need to Frostblink a lot, like things like Strand, Atoll, stuff like that where it's flat. But just something to keep in mind. Yes, obviously there's still a ton of upgrades to make on this. Like I really ideally would like to get a Watcher's Eye with Clarity for damage taken from mana before life or mana's extra ES. I could fit another Cluster Jewel setup down here. I could fit an Apprentice Pact right where this Healthy Mind is. I'd probably have to move the Healthy Mind down by Point Blank or up here, but that one's probably too much travel. I can't realistically find another place to put it, but like a Apprentice Pact here with flat mana, increased lightning damage, or Chaos Res would be pretty nice right here. Side note, it's pretty unfortunate that this Lethal Pride eats Ghost Dance, because I would take Ghost Dance otherwise, since it's very good, since we have a lot of evasion, a lot of ES. But this is just such a point-dense area that it's hard not to have my Lethal Pride here, because it's like right here I have 4% life, 4% life, 4% life, 4% life, some strength, and then double damage. Ideally, one of these nodes would have 0.4 damage leech his life, so I could drop these 3 points. I'd just move this mastery down to the mana mastery at the bottom of the tree. And then I would obviously ideally get Intimidate on one of these nodes. Otherwise, I can get Rage implicit as a Searing Exarch mod on my gloves, and then have the nearby enemies are Intimidate while you have Rage. I don't know that there's a ton of other Ascendancies that I would play Venom Gyre as. Like, you could do Berserker, but I think you're a little too point starved to do that, honestly. Even with like getting extra projectiles from like Cluster Jewels. But if you're playing like another generic attack like Wildstrike or something like that, I would eventually play that as a Berserker, since you're actually also pretty good tree placement, since you can come over by duels to get all that mana, and you can come up here and then do the Unnatural Instinct Apprentice Pack thing right here. But since you need to travel to like the extra proj and all the claw nodes, it's kind of hard for me to justify this as something as other than a Deadeye. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, guys. I just kind of wanted to talk about this build in particular, and yeah, any future upgrades, because to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to continue to play this league. I've just not had the most fun from playing this league in hardcore. I think eventually I'm going to take a little bit of a break and then maybe re-roll in softcore, see how that goes. It's been a really long time since I played softcore, and I'd like to get experience tier 17 maps like properly, so yeah, I might be doing that. But yeah, thank you guys for stopping by, and see ya.